Thus, that leads us to this story about Elizabeth and her husband, Zacharias. What do we learn about them, Bible scholars, when we're reading that story in St. Luke chapter 1? What do we learn about them? They were barren. They didn't have any children, did they? By man's standard, they couldn't have any children. But we learn that God's will or God's plan doesn't operate by man's reality, doesn't it? It's not limited by man's reality. So all of their lives, the Bible says they were up in age. So all of their lives, they were operating within what the trends were in the community, what the trends were in the social circle, what the trends were in that city that they were in, what happened to other people. So if that happened to other people, that's the way typically everybody, those are the things that people accept would happen to them. That was the scope of their faith, the traditions that were in play, the laws or the rules that were in play, the experiences that other people had. So if this is what everybody else typically went through, the expectation is that everybody will go through the same type of experience. If you live in this place, live amongst these people, this is the way that your life will be. But that doesn't have any influence or have any play or any say in God's way. Because God has his own initiatives, his own reality that he undertakes in order to make things become a reality. And God provides, has his own provisions, his way of providing for us. And that's what this is about. It's talking about man's way of thinking and how man's way causes you to respond versus God's way of thinking and God's way that causes us to respond. So when the Lord introduced in this story in Luke 1, when the angel introduced that God so sent him to tell him that he and his wife will have a child, they will bear a son. The Bible said that they were skeptical. They were skeptical because they were that meant that they had to stop believing the norm. And the norm was that people just did not have children when they were up in age. People just didn't have children when they had been declared barren. They didn't all of a sudden have children. That was the norm. That was the tradition. That was the way that the cultural experience that the average person had where they lived. And as a result of that caused them to be skeptical of what God was able to do. Yet he was considered a priest. What did that mean, he was considered a priest? St. Luke 1 said he was a priest. So what did that mean? He was a priest to who? Yet they didn't believe that God could bless them to have a child. Do you see the irony in this? The God that you have a role, you've been given a job or a title as a priest. Yet you are believing, this same God is saying to you, you are going to have a child, and you've been living in this community, in this city, in this location where all of the people that you guys have known in all your life, and there's been this limit. If somebody was barren, they could never have children. They just might as well forget about it. And you choose to believe that over the God that you say that you have been serving, and you've been doing things to acknowledge that God's power. As a result of this, the angel said, because of your unbelief. Let's go there. I want you to see this. Luke 1:18.
And Zacharias said unto the angel, Whereby shall I know this? I am old man, and my wife well stricken in years.
Okay, so what is he? Now he's talking to an angel of God. And when he makes this statement, these are words he's actually speaking. Does it sound believes what the angel said? No, it doesn't. But he's a priest. So this is a case where he's been so accustomed to believing what everybody else has been experiencing that he doesn't believe, he's not believing that God can perform a miracle for him and his wife. I want you to see this because it's important that we recognize there's man's reality and then there's God's reality. This is the angel coming to Zacharias introducing God's reality. and helping them understand that God's reality is not bound by man's reality. But these are the words that Zechariah spoke to the angel. And the Bible tells us, whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. So he's speaking words of doubt. And as a result of speaking words of doubt to God, there is a consequence for doubting God. God's will is still going to be done, but he's making life harder for himself on the way to God's will being done. Continue reading.
And the angel answered and said unto him, I am Gabriel, that stands in the presence of God, and am sent to speak unto thee, and to show thee things glad tidings.
So he said, I have been sent. Sent by who?
God.
He's been sent by God. So remember in Job 1, the Bible told us that angels assemble themselves before the Lord, and the Lord gives them instructions, and they go out and fulfill those instructions. This is an example how heaven comes into our lives and they intervene. It intervened in a way that we least expected. Do you think Zacharias and his wife expected the angel of Gabriel to show up that day in his life in the way that he did? It wasn't planned by them. So when he showed up and said these things, what they spoke, what Zacharias spoke, what he confessed, was it the right admission or the wrong admission? It was the wrong admission. And this is what God's people do many times in the course of their day. They confess the wrong admission. And when you confess the wrong admission, you reap what? You reap the waste. You reap the failure. You reap the negative results. Look at the negative results that happened to him. Because God's will, what the angel was coming to tell them is that God's will is that you guys have this child. This is a special child. So it's going to happen. But they were speaking doubt. And for speaking doubt, look at what occurred. Continue.
And behold, thou shalt be dumb and not able to speak.
You're going to what? He said you're going to be dumb and not able to speak. Until when? Continue.
Until the day that these things shall be performed. Because thou believest not my words, which shall be fulfilled in their season.
Listen to what he said. In their season, my words are going to be fulfilled. So until these things are fulfilled in the right season, you will no longer be able to speak. That's what he's telling them. You will not be able to speak because of what he said. Because of your unbelief, you will not be able to speak until these things be fulfilled. Because you did not believe. And what I'm trying to get you to see is that what we speak is an indication of what we have faith in. And that's why it's one part of our life that we have to learn to change. We have to learn to recognize how good we are at doing this, speaking the right things, having the right admission, or how bad we are at doing it. But we have to learn, and then we have to ask God to help us learn how to confess the right admission and not the wrong admission. Because what we do is like Zacharias is doing, he's cutting his blessing off. Instead of him being able to speak up until the moment that his child is born, he's not able to speak until the child is born. As a sign, a constant reminder of him of his lack of faith in God. Go over to Proverbs 18. Proverbs 18, verse 21. Let me have a reader, please.
Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof.
The word declares unto us that death and life are in the power of our tongue. What do we do with our tongue? We speak. That's the source of our confession. So death and life is in the power of our confession. That's what the Bible is telling us. So when you think about that, we learn that confession is what? What did we learn that Webster said confession means? Turn over to St. Matthew 10 as you answer that question. What do we learn that confession meant? To declare faith in or adherence to. to declare or admit openly or freely. So what we speak openly, what we speak freely, when we're talking to friends, when we're talking to associates, when we're talking to people in the platform or in the area of our life that we communicate with people in, the words that we speak have meaning. The words that we speak influence the results in our lives. Those words have power. The Bible says death and life are in the power of the tongue. It's not just death and life are in the power of the tongue when you are in church or when you are in Bible study. It's death and life are in the power of the tongue wherever the tongue may be used. That's the thing that we have to recognize. That's the part of our transformation. We have to learn that we have to become better at having the right admission instead of the wrong admission. Many times we don't think about the conversation that we're having with people in our social circle as having any impact on our results in our lives. But in reality, it does. That's what the Bible is telling us here. Because that's when the power of the tongue is at work. When you are in your social setting talking to the people that you communicate with on a daily basis. Are those words that honor God and God's power and ability, or are they words that talk about a person who doubts, a person who don't believe, a person who has accepted and confesses that negative things will happen? We must learn that God's people have to have the right admission. In St. Matthew 10, let me read at verse 32.
Whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will also deny before my Father which is in heaven.
So what is Jesus talking about here? Jesus is talking about our communications. He's talking about our speech in our social circles. He's not talking about your speech at church. He's not talking about your speech at choir rehearsal. He's not talking about your speech when you are on a trip fellowshipping with brethren, like-minded people. He's talking about wherever you are, wherever you speak, if that speech suggests that you confess him, that you believe in him, that you trust in him, that you accept him, the Lord said, I accept you. If when you are with those people, it shows that you don't accept me, then he said, I don't accept you. You can see the disconnect because many times, again, when people become born again, they do look at a lot of the parts of their lives that they need to change. But the part that many times get the least amount of attention is the actual confessions that we make, having the right admission. Understanding that what we speak about, we bring about. Because what we speak is insight to what we have faith in, what we trust in, what we are relying on. 1 Samuel 17 is a good example of this. In 1 Samuel 17, can we have a reader at the 26th verse?
And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth the Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?
So listen to the words that David spoke. Now, Bible scholars, you know this story. This story is about David and the Philistine known as Goliath. We're not focusing on the story today, the details of the story today, but what we are focusing on is just this component. This is David and how David got involved. David was coming to his brothers to bring them some food. David was tending the sheep, minding his own business, doing what his plan called for that day, and then his dad changed David's plans. His dad said, hey, go take this food to your brothers and some of the other members of the army, this food to them. So David was being obedient, doing what his father told him to do. When David got there, he heard the communications from different people who were in in the army of the children of Israel who were fighting, and he heard a buzz about the Philistine, of this particular Philistine. And so David was just trying to understand what was going on. And when David asked the question and he began to hear bits and pieces about what was going on, he asked specifically about what the situation was. And then someone began to give him details about it. But he said his response to this was, listen to his response, David's response, before he got the details, all the details of it. He said in that 26th verse, "For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Look at the words that David is using. That's what I want you to pay attention to. Pay attention to the words that David is using. This is his admission. This is his confession. David is saying the armies of the living God, because they are of the living God, they are more powerful than anybody on the earth. So who is this individual to believe that they can defy or go against something that God has made, something that God has put in place? So his confession is what demonstrates power. David speaks and he declares or openly admits how things will turn out because of God's power. He's admitting that nobody can stand against the armies of the living God. So who is this person that can go against God? Is this, if you heard this statement, does this statement sound like David has faith in God, in the Lord? Now, if you read this chapter, what you will find are the conversations that are going back and forth with Saul and with the members of the army of the children of Israel. You won't get this kind of faith being spoken. No reference to what God can do. This is the only reference to about what God could do. Not even from the king. Because their thoughts and their conversations are looking at the situation. And they're saying, we can't overcome the situation. They're looking at the situation and they're saying the situation is bigger than anything that they have, bigger than anything that any solution that they can come up with. And in their mind, the problem is so bad, nobody in the army wants to go up and fight them. Even though the king made this offer saying, I'm going to give you all of this stuff, but nobody said, I ain't taking that deal. Because they're not believing that God is the one that makes them victorious. They're thinking what? They are the ones that make themselves victorious. And they're saying, I cannot be victorious over this huge man. David is not saying he is victorious over this huge man. He's saying God will make him victorious over this huge man. That's a totally different perspective. Again, they're looking at it through man's reality. According to man's reality, what is the situation? According to man's reality, as we get ready to close, what is the situation? Nobody can win. Nobody can beat this big man. Nobody can go up against this huge man and win. That's man's reality. That's Mammon's reality. But because they have been serving the Lord, that should not be the reality that drives their life. And because Mammon's reality is driving their lives, what kind of conversation, what kind of confessions is Saul and the members of the children of Israel's army making? What kind of confessions are they making? Positive or negative confessions? They're making negative confessions about what can't happen, about what they can't do, about what nobody can do. True, nobody can do it, no human can do it, but they're forgetting the God who has been keeping them all this time. See, that's the change that needs to happen. But you see who they have faith in by the words that they use.
Oh, praise be to God, from whom all blessings flow. It is our prayer at Clay Family Ministries that your life has been increased with the increase of God through this study. We appreciate and are thankful for your fellowship during this life skills study segment.